And we're recording.
And we're live. Awesome. So, welcome to our next session. To Scott and to anybody else who might show up, and to those out in YouTube and LinkedIn land. And this session is all about goals and rewards. We're going to talk about goals in organizations and the subsequent rewards that we tend to ascribe to those goals.
Yeah. And to get the ball rolling, since at least you're here, Scott, as well, and maybe we can just even talk about what we see here is when we think of goals and rewards, what comes up for us? So I don't know, Scott, if you're able to unmute or if you want us to start.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing that came to mind is like goals, objectives, and key results. Indicators, metric.
Yeah.
SMART goals.
Yeah, it's interesting that you think of OKRs and metrics when you think about goals, because while they certainly are related, I think of them as two different things. The goal is the objective that you're trying to achieve. The metric is, if done well, how you know you have achieved the goal, right? So for example, if I have a goal of learning to play guitar, then that's my overall goal. I might break that down into like learn the A chord and learn the B chord, right? And then I might have a metric associated with that that says, you know, I can play the A chord without looking at my hand or something like that, right? That's kind of like a metric associated with the goal. But yeah, but to me, like, you know, the metrics are related, but they're a separate component than the goal itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like a way of validating that the objective is being met, or we're getting closer to the objective, that we're able to find tangible ways, or at least find tangible things to validate that we're getting closer to that, with the objective being perhaps less tangible.
Right.
Or maybe more subjective, like what you just said there with the example there, Mike, with the learning to play the guitar. Saying that you can play the guitar can be considered a subjective thing, because I don't know how to play the guitar, and I might say, okay, sounds like Mike knows how to play the guitar. But if I'm a guitar player that I've been playing for the last 20 years and I hear you play guitar, I'm thinking, well, maybe you need to keep practicing. I don't know.
Right. Right. I'm no The Edge from U2, right? I'm not at that level yet.
Right. And it could be then to understand how you're making progress is, as you said, being able to play certain chords, or maybe certain segments of a song, or even playing a whole song, is a way of showcasing that you're making that progress.
Exactly.
Sure. Well, like squad goals and SMART goals aside, when I heard you say my goal is to play guitar, that felt more like an aspiration to me. How do you differentiate those?
Differentiate an aspiration from a goal. That's actually a really good point, because so let's take SMART, right? SMART acronym was created, you know, to try and make goals more defined, right? So, I mean, hopefully everybody knows what SMART is, but you know, it's specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and time-bound. So if you think about creating a goal that meets all 5 of those criteria, it is very well defined, as opposed to, you know, hey, let's go to the moon, or let's play guitar, or, you know, something that's a little bit more vision-esque, right, and aspirational. So I think that's a great question, Scott. Is my goal to play the guitar, or is that a vision? Maybe that's a vision. Maybe that's not a goal.
Well, and here's the thing about goals, right? Because depending on who you speak to, a goal can be considered something that's achievable versus something that's aspirational. And people would have goals that might be, let's say, I want to be able to run a marathon by the summer, which might be considered an aspirational goal. Maybe something that's achievable is to say that I want to be able to run, let's say, 2 kilometers in under X amount of time. That might be considered, say, let's say, a step towards that aspirational goal. And aspirational goals by design are also kind of like helping to define that kind of direction that one wants to take. And it could be that there would be, let's say, more measurable or SMART goals or whatever it is you want to name it, as steps towards getting towards that aspirational goal. It's like, how do you break this down into thinking, okay, this thing is just so out there, I have no idea how to make steps towards that.
You know what it sounds like, Dino? It sounds like you're taking an epic and breaking it down into more specific, discrete, and small user stories.
We're not going to talk about Scrum and user stories and all that. The idea is that at the end of the day, we might have certain wishes that we want to achieve. And the idea is as well as, okay, how do we make this a reality? And I would say that both are needed in any kind of working context. First, to have something bigger than us that's worth working for and working towards, along with having some notion of making progress. Because if we have some notion of making progress without direction, then we're just doing work for the sake of doing work. And if we just have a direction without any steps showcasing progress, then it just feels like it's an unachievable dream and little else.
And you don't get that sense of progress if you don't have, if all you have is this aspiration.
Yeah.
Right. That's really cool. I like where this conversation is going, because I actually want to tie it back now to my commentary about, you know, there's the goal and then there's the metric. So this only works on YouTube, so sorry if you're listening because my hands are moving. If you have this aspirational goal and then you break it down into smaller goals to help you define the progress, one could argue that the achievement of those smaller goals is the metric, right? That you don't need to come up with, you know, specific metrics around each one of those small goals. Maybe it makes sense, but I'm just kind of thinking my way through that. If you take a large aspirational goal and break it down into smaller specific goals that help you to track to the aspirational goal, then the achievement of those smaller goals is in and of itself a metric to show you your progress.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think we need to worry so much about the naming. I don't think it's about metrics or smaller goals or anything like that. It's ways of showcasing that we're making progress. And those ways of making progress could be a big aspiration if we're kind of drilling deeper down. And I think this is also the part that up until now we've been talking about, maybe personal aspirations and personal goals and personal ways of breaking it down. And you know, just kind of bringing it into the context of an organization. You know, the other interesting thing about goals here is about creating that sense of alignment, right? Because especially when we're talking about breaking things down, we might have some organizational goals, and then breaking it down, there's a goal that is something that you're aiming for in your area, Mike, for example. And you, Scott, you have your goals and I have my goals, and we understand how each of us contribute to these goals, which then contributes to the overall goals of the organization with what it's trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of using goals as a means of alignment, because you know, if your goal for your department is, I don't know, I'm going to make something up, is to increase the revenue or something like that of the organization, but the organization's goal is to, I don't know, go to the moon, Actually, let's use a real example, is to, um, make people better, right? So like it's like a coaching platform or something like that. Then it's not that they're diametrically opposed, but there's a little bit of they feel off, right? And so by having these conversations around what are your individual department goals, are they in direct competition? Because I've definitely seen that. And then how do they align, or do they align to the higher level goal above them into the organization or whatever, is really, really important to identify those points of misalignment,
Yeah.
because it's those points of misalignment that are going to really challenge the organization.
Yeah. And I think I just want to underline this point that you just shared there, Mike, because I think that's where the main challenge lies for a lot of organizations with regards to goals, is that sense of alignment and that sense of misalignment. Typically because organizations are structured in such a way that they're structured by functions or specialties, and their goals are, no fault of anybody, is based on, okay, this is your function, so we're going to have the goal of doing the function well.
Right.
For example, having the HR function done well, or have the marketing function done well, or that specialty done well. And that can help lead to even deeper siloed thinking, and more about the job, thinking more about the job and not so much about the person that might, let's say, benefit from that.
Right.
And the other element there is, as well, is that sometimes because of that, these objectives might compete to the point that it actually creates a lot of tension and conflict within an organization.
Absolutely.
You got the famous example of, let's innovate and make changes. So you have a department that's specialized in making changes, for example, software development. And then there's another department which is, let's maintain stability.
Right.
Within digital operations, for example. And then guess what? If they have a goal of saying make as many changes as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and this thing make as few changes as possible, of course, there's going to be a problem there. Of course, there's going to cause challenges there, because it's going to be tug of war every time these people meet up, every single time. How do we make sure that we get as many changes in? How do we make sure we don't get any changes in, or we get the least number of changes in? No, too risky, too risky, too risky, too risky. And then there's frustration and resentment.
I have a friend who tells a great story where back in the olden days, when there was a very strong dev department and a very strong QA department, and the whole QA department was gold on finding bugs.
Yeah.
Right? On, how many bugs can you find? And this is actually a bit of a segue into the rewards, but we won't go there yet. And so the every QA engineer, every manager, every director, they were all and their reports going up was talking about how many bugs did they find, their bug count, right? Well, my friend comes into the Agile department, teaches them, TDD, good Agile coding practices, really taking ownership of the code and different things like that. And they started producing such good code that the QA department couldn't find bugs anymore. And that caused a problem. So where are we in our cultural thinking that developing good software that is bug-free is a problem? Right? And yeah, it created this tension that had to be escalated up and had to realign on the goals, because neither one of them were really thinking about the end product or the end customer. Let's produce something that our customer can use, right? Let's produce something that makes our customer happy. They were so focused on their siloed goals of, crank out software and find bugs.
Yeah. It's great hearing. I mean, it's not great, but it's interesting to hear these stories, because it really showcases the impact of people focusing on outputs rather than outcome.
Right.
Like getting stuff done for the sake of getting stuff done without a notion of, what is the purpose that we're trying to achieve with this? Like, what are we really trying to do here? And people lose sight of that because, this is your objective. You need to find a number of bugs, when, ultimately it is a symptom of saying we want to make sure that the thing comes out with the best quality possible.
Right.
And people lose sight of that. Because this is now your function is you need to find this number of bugs or this number of defects. That is your mission. And losing sight of, we want to ensure that this is the best quality product we can give to our customers for the sake of our customers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking of like, this was a great example in the software development world, and just kind of to broaden this out a little bit even more is this, like the idea of when we talk about any kind of organization that's trying to move towards business agility and being adaptive, you also find many examples of these kinds of things happening as well. For example, you would have a sales department that's trying to maximize the number of sales because that's its function, and sometimes getting caught with the notion of we want to maximize sales, and people resorting to things like that might be considered a little bit unethical, like selling things that don't exist,
Right.
or over promising, and then that puts pressure on the rest of the organization to deliver, and that could cause quite a few problems as well. Thankfully, I haven't seen too many instances of that, and I think more people are becoming aware of that is unsustainable. And I think that's also an interesting thing to consider, is how can we do this in a way that is also sustainable, that is able to keep delighting customers along with having continual growth as an organization.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges, I would say, in organizations right now is good goal setting, because let's say you have a really highly intelligent but also highly aware, highly purpose-driven C-suite. So they come together, they're purpose-driven, they want to be customer focused, and they set some nice high-level strategic goals, right? Well, then it goes down to the level below them, and that sense of purpose tends to diminish further down the hierarchy that you go, because eventually you kind of get to a point where somebody is like, well, just tell me what my goals are. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to achieve? Right? They're thinking output. They're no longer thinking outcome. They're no longer thinking purpose, right? And I feel like that's one of the challenges, is maintaining that sense of purpose throughout the whole organization. I spent time as a QA manager for a number of years, and I can't tell you, how many times I had conversations, and we had a goal-based system. We were supposed to set quarterly goals, individual, of course. That's a whole nother topic. But as I sat down with my direct reports and we were trying to set up, hey, what are your goals for this upcoming quarter? I got a lot of just, well, I have, there's this project, there's these test cases, there's this product, and I just need to test it, right? So my goals are to test this product and, fill out bug reports. And I'm like, and I tried to be like, let's think a little bit higher level than this. And it was a challenge. If the culture is in place to be very individualistic, it can be a bit of a challenge in an organization to set goals that are more collective and purpose-driven rather than individualistic and siloed.
So I'm just curious, Scott, I don't know if you're able to unmute and share maybe some of your experiences, if this sounds familiar, or if you've seen other things. Just curious to hear about how you've seen things. And I'm imagining if you are able to unmute. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm soothing my son right now, so.
No worries.
But thank you. That's a good conversation so far. Keep going.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the vote of confidence there. So let's. So I mean, and interesting what you just mentioned there, Mike, with the idea of purpose-driven, and the thing is, a lot of organizations are just not there yet, and maybe they need to be, or maybe they don't need to be. But nonetheless, we just need to understand where they are right now, what the current thinking is, and not to necessarily judge them, but at least understand what the challenges could be if they want to make that shift.
Yeah.
And the challenges are around around that. One thing, I don't know if you had these experiences, but I've seen that that the idea of goals being coupled with the notion of rewards or compensation.
Yes.
And I've seen that create quite a few different challenges, because when literally money is involved, what happens is that it says that, okay, we ask you to do A, B, and C, but if you do A, or if you focus on A, you're going to get rewarded,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it creates an interesting dynamic, at least in my experience, where people focus on the things that they would be rewarded for, which then creates a little bit of tension there, especially if we're trying to create, like cross-functional areas of teams, people having that collaborative spirit. When they're asked to do something and they say, that's not my job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know if you had kind of similar experiences there.
Very much so. So again, when I was a QA manager, the company had the very, common setup. I said we developed quarterly goals. Everybody had a variable portion to their comp in the form of a bonus, and how much of that bonus got paid out was directly tied to your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Like directly. So if you created 5 goals and you set them to just, let's say, equal percentage, 20% each, then if you missed one of the goals in the quarter, you missed 20% of your bonus payout that quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then now start to complicate that by saying some goals were weighted higher, right? Maybe you had a 40% goal, maybe you had a 10% goal, right? And different things like that. And that created huge amounts of tension, precisely because, again, very common, these goals are very individualistic. It's like, Joe, what are your goals that you, Joe, are going to accomplish, and then put your percentages. Okay, you, Sally, what are your goals that you, Sally, are going to accomplish, right? And then put the percentages against them. And if they happen to not align between Joe and Sally, or it's not that they didn't align, it's more like, if there was a project that really required Joe and Sally to work together on something, right? They were disincentivized to work together because they were so focused on making sure they met their goals, because they didn't want to lose their bonus money.
No matter what the cost.
No matter what the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely saw that a lot. And one of the things that I did as a manager, when I recognized this, was I said, okay, we're going to change how we're going to create quarterly goals. I'm going to bring everybody together in the conference room, and I'm going to take my laptop and project a document, and everybody is going to see everybody's goals. And we are going to collectively, as a team, figure out what everybody's goals are. And it was boy, talk about a culture shift. Like I got some serious pushback, because some people were like, no, those are mine. They're personal. That's like HR level information. So I had to work through that. But what was great is, after doing that for about 3 quarters, I started to notice, when I was working on Joe's goals and I was projecting them, Sally would actually pipe up and say, hold on, like, I'm going to need your help, Joe, on my goals over here. So can we put something in your goals that talk about helping me? And I was like, yes. So, I mean, that's just one small anecdote of, you know, the challenge of individual goals being tied to rewards, but, you know, one potential way to try and begin to overcome them.
Yeah, that's a great example. One thing that I've seen work quite well is making that shift of making those individual goals team goals, right? And everybody has equal, let's say, equal influence and equal impact of those goals. And more individually is how they are showing up, so to speak, in on a day-to-day basis. Are they? Is this person being collaborative? Are they having healthy conversations? You know, healthy conflict. You know, because conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's
Right.
unskillful conflict. It could have a detrimental impact. Many times, conflict is actually very good to have, because that's when people have that passion and energy to talk about things, clarify that, get that alignment, and then from there move on to something that's even more compelling than any of the ideas that came into the conversation. And that's where there is that foundation of trust that's needed. Of course, if there's no trust, then there's no good conflict, so to speak. And with that, having those team goals of saying, okay, that the quality is a certain level, that the changes that are being made are meeting certain needs and things like that. Those are team goals. That's what the team aspires to do. And as a team, they can achieve that. There's no specific individual that can meet any of those goals by themselves. And again, I've also seen similar experience that it does take a good couple of months for a shift to start happening.
Yes.
But the idea is that you're going to have to you have to kind of persevere through that. Not to say, you know, crack the whip, this is the way it has to be, take it or leave it. But it's kind of like, okay, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to keep working past this and going through all the mud and all the difficulties, because we can get to a better place with this, and it's worth it.
Yeah, and I'll even take your example one step further. I was working for a company that is a very traditional, you know, business IT, and they started to do what you said, where they were creating team goals instead of individual goals. So the HR system was still individual based, obviously, right? But they got together as a team and they literally, like, you know, one person wrote it up in Word, emailed it, and everybody copied and pasted it into their system. But what was interesting is that when it came to annual performance review time, it still was up to the manager to, you know, rate the individual employee. And the manager might talk to other managers who might talk to other people, but at the end of the day, it was the manager who determined the performance of the employee. And one of the things that they changed, which I thought was pretty cool, was, hey, we're all working day in and day out on this team. The people who know how I've performed the best is not my manager, because my manager is dealing with, you know, 10 other employees and other teams. The people who know my performance the best are my teammates. So every single member on the team would send a separate email to each person's manager, right, saying, you know, Sally did this year. Sally really helped me. These are some areas of improvement for Sally. Then the next person, Sally did this year. This is, you know what I mean? So the manager was a bit inundated, that we got a bit of a complaints from the managers saying, oh my God, this is a lot of work. But at the end of the day, their performance was more based upon team input, right? And team productivity and team outcomes and team achievement than it was on any kind of individual stuff that the manager had blinders on about.
Interesting that you mentioned that, and this whole notion of performance management as well, how that's also coupled with goals. I've seen, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, and a lot of organizations are kind of, let's say, still wanted to keep performance management in some capacity. And there's a whole conversation we can have about the merits of performance management and all those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that every company in the world should now abolish performance management. Just understand that it does accentuate certain behaviors.
Right.
And what was interesting is that so I've been working in a few different places in the last few years, and the idea was that this is like an organization that wants to go agile, that wants to be able to be innovative, to take risks and things like that. And it was interesting to see, because with the peer feedback that they got, that they were taking risks and they were punished for it.
Oh,
Right?
ouch.
Not to say that they were taking humongous risks that were putting millions of euros in jeopardy or anything like that, or dollars or whatever. But it was just that, they were trying certain things and just people didn't like it. And they let themselves be heard through the manager when he was asking for feedback about this individual. And this poor guy, I mean, he said, like, I don't understand. We said that we're supposed to be taking risks. I take risks and I'm getting punished for it. So are they really serious about wanting to make these changes happen? So this way, where it also brings in that interesting thing about, a company wanting to do something, but then acting in a different way, and how that impacts people. Because especially because this is you're still going with an annual cycle for performance reviews and stuff like that. They've just gone back a whole year now. Because this happened at the beginning of this year, they got this, and now I wouldn't blame them if they wouldn't be willing to take any more risks for the following year. Which really it creates an interesting dynamic of how people and the whole organization can be impacted by such things and such policy.
Absolutely. And what you're speaking to is the intersection between culture and system, right? It reminds me of the wonderful story, of the monkeys in the cage with the bananas on the top of the ladder.
Absolutely.
Right. Another thought that came to me though too was, and I want to be clear, I don't think that goal setting itself is bad. In fact, I think setting goals is actually really, really good. Go back to my guitar example, right? I have a goal that I want to learn how to play the guitar, right? I also have some business goals. I have some personal goals, because goals are what put us in motion. Yep. They are what help us to make forward progress towards something. Absolutely. So the act of setting goals, I think, is very, very important. What I think we get bogged down with, especially in corporate organizations and corporate cultures, is when we start to tie money to the goals, because as soon as you do that, you're basically, I'm going to make a platitude here, you're of the mindset that without this, people will just not do the goals, that people are inherently lazy, that people don't want to work, that people need some kind of incentive. And the only incentive, A, that people need an incentive, and B, the only incentive that a corporate organization has to offer is a financial one. Yeah. So first of all, I disagree that people need, I disagree that people need an external incentive. This speaks to internal versus intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, right? Nobody's paying me to learn how to play the guitar. In fact, people would probably pay me to stop playing the guitar right now. But I do it because I have an internal drive. I have an internal want, right? It's very, very intrinsic. It's a goal, that it's something that I want to achieve. And if we could turn our organizational goals into something that feels intrinsic to our employees, right? The perceived need to attach an external motivator, such as financial, to it starts to lessen. That's point one. And point two is that the only form of motivation that a corporation has to offer to its employees is one of financial. And I completely disagree with that. I think there's lots of other ways that an organization can provide. If you're looking for an extrinsic motivation, there's lots of other things that companies can provide.
Yeah, what you're alluding to is some of the research that Daniel Pink done with his book that's quite well known in many different sectors called Drive, which is that once people have enough money to meet their needs, then money becomes less and less a motivator. If you have more than enough money to take care of you, yourself, your family, pay the bills, that all those things no longer become an issue. Typically, even if you would double that, it might feel nice at the beginning, having that extra number show up in the bank account. And there's been quite a bit of research to suggest that that is less and less an incentive, especially as time goes on, because there are no specific needs that need to be met there, because they're all covered more than enough with the salary that you're getting. And so the idea is that what would actually motivate people in this sense are internally or intrinsic. In his book, Drive, he was alluding to three main ones, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy being, I have the power to do the work in the way that I believe it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And this also goes in the sense of working in an autonomous way with the team, having a clear goal and being able to work on that together without being micromanaged or told what to do left, right, and center. And so linked to that goal is having a sense of purpose, something that's bigger than themselves to work towards, having a clear reason, like I am making a meaningful contribution, and that's why it's worth getting out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in something that's bigger than myself, and I believe in it that so much that I want to take an active part in it. And then the third one is mastery, which is the idea that there's a belief of I am doing my job well and I'm getting better at my craft, and I have the ability to make even more growth there, and having that sense of achievement with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some studies to suggest that there are other elements. Those are like the three main ones. One that I've come across in the last few years as well is having a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So having like that shared sense of identity with your fellow tribe in many respects. That is also, and I even have my own stories to say there. Like when I was way back in the day, I used to work with a team, and let me tell you, it didn't feel like work. It really didn't. It felt like we were just hanging out for the whole day, every day, Monday to Friday. We just got a lot of stuff done in the meantime as well. It really felt like we were hanging out, and there was this sense of belonging there. We would have lunch together. We would have our morning coffees together. Half the team actually was based in another country, and they would travel to Spain where we would work together. And so every now and again, we would have like a dinner together and all those kinds of things. There was a real sense of cohesion and bond with all of us together. And I think it's quite interesting. It's been very hard to replicate that ever since. I found.
Yes, and I want to key on that, because we talk about that in agile teams, right? How the Tuckman model, right, into forming, storming, norming, and then all the way up into performing. And I've gotten pushback in the past couple of years talking about, well, what do you want us to be? You want us to be all buddies and like friends outside of work? Look, this is work. I come to work to do work. Right. And I want to make a distinction. I believe that a team can absolutely be productive, right? They can absolutely, turn out good stuff, even potentially be purpose driven. What I want to key on from your example, Dino, is that if you get to that higher level of belonging, right, where you have that camaraderie, where you have that sense of cohesion, it just elevates your performance to a higher level.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is needed to be performant. It's just that it adds to your performance in a way that is probably indescribable and probably only experiential.
Yeah. And I think that's also a key point there. It's not necessarily about being friends or that you'd be willing to have a beer with these people all day, every day, and like afterwards or anything like that, but having that sense of cohesion.
Yeah.
That you can get the job done, you're all professionals and you can all work together, definitely has its impact. Because one thing is performance being productivity, there's the other element, which is positivity. And I would argue that the best teams need both.
Absolutely.
And positivity doesn't mean that everybody is friends. It just means that you have a constructive work environment that you can collaborate with and share thoughts in a constructive way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agree with you there. And that all ties back to rewards, because we were talking about intrinsic motivators and intrinsic rewards. And these are just a couple of examples of those kind of intrinsic rewards that can be separated from the act of goal setting.
Yeah.
So to kind of, bottom line it a little bit, we started off talking about goals and rewards, right? And I think, the bottom line here is we're talking about if you're in an organization where those two are tightly coupled, begin to look for ways to decouple them so that you can be more goal oriented and talk about rewards in different contexts.
Yeah, and so there are some ideas to kind of move in that direction. And, I can imagine that there's so many people out there, and I've also come across this, where it's kind of like, how can I possibly kind of meet that middle ground with someone that has opposing goals to myself and things like that. And I can totally understand this way of thinking, and it's not easy, right? It's very hard. And so rather than thinking how can you get them closer to you, it's how can you get closer to them?
Right.
How can you genuinely look at how to help a person meet their goals and not really thinking about how they're going to meet your goals?
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to take some time, because one thing that I came across the other day, and it really blew my mind when I found this out, and I'm thinking, why didn't I know about this before? Is you might be able to change your behavior in the snap of your fingers. Like, from now on, I'm going to be doing this. Done deal. Even though we know that changing behavior can take time.
I was going to say.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we are able to change our behavior like that.
Okay.
It takes months for people's perceptions of you to change.
100%.
In fact, there were some studies that were suggesting 9 months.
Wow.
So people might know me to behaving in a certain way and all that, and people create their story around me about how I am and how I show up.
Dino always does this.
Exactly. I am always like this. I change my behavior like that. For people to know that this is the real deal, it could take 9 months.
Yeah. It's like, oh, Dino's acting a little different. Like, even getting them to say, oh, Dino might be acting a little bit different, you're probably looking at 1 to 2 months just for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I wonder how long this is going to last.
Yes. And that's the first reaction that you get. Dino's acting a little different. I wonder how long this is going to last. Right. And during that 9 months, if you, Dino, slip up and accidentally, slip into your old behavior, even just once, confirmation bias rears its ugly head, right? And it's like, see, told you so. Dino is always like this.
Exactly.
So yeah.
But the thing is that there are always things that you can try to do. And the invitation is to work towards that, and also to be patient, because it does take time. Because we all have our own beliefs and our own stories that we've made up about people, about organizations, about teams and areas and functions and departments. And we need to understand that changing behavior can be one thing. Changing perceptions about that behavior is a completely different thing. And we need to be in for the long run, because if we believe they're going to make these kinds of changes happen within the span of a few months, then we're going to get a very rude awakening and realization that it's not the case. And that's when it could cause problems. So take your time, be patient, and really think about how can you help others with their goals rather than focusing on your own goals.
Brilliant.
And maybe that could also start creating a shift. Maybe there's time before the end of the year to fix to solve it.
Maybe. All right, so just kind of looking at the time, this has been a great conversation with you, Dino. Thank you. And thanks, Scott, for kind of, being here and as our silent witness. I appreciate that. I just want to mention here at the tail end that goals and rewards is one of the topics that Dino and I cover in our upcoming class on adaptive org design. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hopefully there'll be a link to our LinkedIn page, our company page of Leadership Space, and you'll see this on LinkedIn as well with a link back to our Leadership Space page. And please come and check us out. There's a link to an Eventbrite. You can go and check out all the information on Eventbrite. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to answer any questions you have. But we talk about this and a lot of other really cool stuff in our adaptive org design class.
Yeah, we dig into formal and informal networks, how we could decouple the work from the people, and to be able to treat those two things as different concepts, and how they interrelate. Obviously, we talk about goals and rewards and the impact that it has on organizations in greater depth, with some exercises there as well. And what else am I missing, Mike? Team dynamics as well, along
planning,
with
environment.
And looking also as well with being able to understand the system and where there could be some ways of making continuous optimizations in small chunks to improve the organization. And when we say organization, it doesn't have to be the organization.
Right.
It's also it could be just as small as a team or as a department, anywhere that you may have influence. And influence doesn't necessarily mean being the boss, but just being able to perhaps influencing influences is also influence.
Absolutely.
And in fact, in many situations, that's how certain things get done, is not by being the one that calls the shots, but being able to showcase new ways of thinking to the people that call the shots.
Absolutely. So get on LinkedIn, subscribe or follow or whatever the terminology is in LinkedIn to the Leadership Space page, and you'll be notified of new sessions such as this as we get together and continue to talk about really cool topics.
Indeed.
Scott, are you able to join us here in the last minute? He's reaching around his son trying to find the unmute button.
Or breaking up a fight or something like that.
Or breaking up a fight, yes. All right, he doesn't look like he's able to join us. So I think we'll end the recording here and see you next time in our next session.
Indeed, thanks again.